Sarah, I'm going to lead off with you on this one. Personal branding. I touch base really quick on LinkedIn, but how important is it as a talent acquisition specialist to utilize that tool? And, you know, what are your thoughts as far as making sure that you've got a good profile?
Right. Definitely. I think, social media and all your branding is incredibly important today. Especially some industries are going to rely more heavily on it than others. But LinkedIn, especially if you're in a professional role and that's the type of job you're looking for, I think it's incredibly important to keep it updated and make sure it's consistent with your resume. When we look at that, we look at somebody's resume, and if you're looking at their LinkedIn at the same time, you want to see, do they match? If you are listing things in chronological order and they're not consistent, it raises a lot of red flags as to, well, which one's honest and which one's maybe not. So I would say once you have that resume completed, bounce your resume up against your LinkedIn and make sure that your outline is consistent with both of them. If you want to do other social media, a lot of people, depending again on the type of your industry you're in, you might put your LinkedIn profile link to it on your resume. You might put a link to Facebook or Twitter, just depending on what industry you are. So I would say for any of those, if you're going to be using them as an applicant, make sure that your profiles are clean, make sure that they're your best representation of yourself. If you have samples of your work that you want to throw out there, I know LinkedIn will let you put samples of things out there, but really make sure that anything out there is going to be your best representation of who you are, because recruiters across many various industries do go out and look at people's social media accounts. And conversely, on the other side, if you have a personal and a professional Facebook, make sure to annotate which one is which and lock down your personal one so that people can't see it. Because, people will use things that you put on your personal profiles to maybe help or hurt you in the job search. So I would say if you're going to put it out there publicly, just make sure it's content that you would want people to see when they're looking at you for a job.
Thanks, Sarah. Greg, Rick, I knew I was going to say that. Rich. Oh, man, I knew it. Rich, when you're doing the workshops over at Mount Carmel, what kind of advice are you giving to a lot of the service members and vets as far as putting their LinkedIn together? Do you find that a lot of times they find it might be a little different given their military background versus somebody that's just been a civilian worker all their lives?
Sure. So we have a lot of vets that come through that some don't have a LinkedIn set up yet. So the big thing we try to get to them, there's a lot of individuals that don't want to get everything out there. We try to let them know it's not Facebook. LinkedIn is a professional page that can help brand them to get them out there and get them connected to some of these companies that are looking. So first thing we try to let them know is that they need to kind of get out of that military mindset now. They're going to be a civilian, so they need to take a professional civilian photo. The shoulder and above, nice, you can get them done really easy, but that's going to be what you're getting now. You're not getting a retired lieutenant colonel or sergeant major now. You're getting civilian Richard coming to your workforce, and this is what I'm bringing. So one, it's getting into that mindset, and for some it's hard, but for some it's just getting them to do that. Once you do that, then utilize it to your advantage. Once it's set up chronological or however you want it, and you start putting your resume in there, you're going to start letting LinkedIn be a tool for you by getting reached out to by recruiters. Every day goes by that tons of those jobs that I push out are because they're coming to me looking at my webpage or something of that nature. So it's a great tool if you use it correctly.
I agree 100%. And a lot of times people, they seem to, view LinkedIn as like Facebook. So I see background photos of a camping trip or something like that. And I'm like, you really want to kind of keep that, a background photo as representative of the roles that you're trying to do. When I, as a contractor for LinkedIn, and I'm reviewing all of this stuff, I always see the blue space. That's just, there's nothing put in there. And I've told them from time to time, you guys should make that all-star profile as well, having the background in addition to that headshot, visible. And especially with the background photos, I like to try to make sure that they are correlating with the type of role. If they're a logistics professional, I'll put things like planes and trains and intermodal something theme in there because that's what they're going for. Thanks a lot. I know you spend a lot of time with your students, going through and making sure that they are portraying a positive image. And nowadays, we have this Generation Z workforce that's entering college and starting to do internships and so forth. What kind of advice can you give on virtual networking and using the social media platforms as a smart way to, try to wiggle yourself into that internship or entry-level role?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to talk a little bit about LinkedIn specifically because people may not be aware that you can actually, there's a grade. You actually get graded on how well your LinkedIn profile is doing. And it's called the social selling index. And I'll put a link to the social selling index in the chat so you can all do that. But it goes through and measures like how active are you? How complete is your profile? How engaged are you? Within your network? Are you making connections with people that are in your industry? Or are you just kind of randomly connecting with your friends and not utilizing it as a tool to really expand your network? And so that's a really good tool that you can, if you're logged into your LinkedIn account, you can click on this link and it'll actually give you a percentage grade. So somewhere between 0 and 100% and tell you how well you're doing. So it's a really neat way just to kind of make sure that you're getting the most out of LinkedIn. And what I tell students is to, if you're actively searching for a job, there's a feature in LinkedIn where you can indicate that you're open to opportunities. So recruiters know that you're hiring. Make sure that you have the keywords for whatever industry you're trying to break into, that you're using the keywords and the language for that industry. So we see it a lot with military veterans that they're trying to get into the civilian sector and they still might be using a lot of military lingo that may or may not align. And sometimes students don't necessarily know what language they should be using for a particular industry. So you might have to do a little bit of research on that end. But I encourage them to do 3 things every day in LinkedIn. So if you're actively looking for a job, share a post, like a post, send a message, do 3 little things every day in LinkedIn that'll help keep your profile kind of active, and it'll pop up in your connections news feeds and it'll just keep you more relevant. And also you can do a lot of research. There's strong research tools in LinkedIn where you can search for contacts in certain companies and you can look at where did they graduate from. I can go on and search for who graduated from UCCS, who works at Lockheed Martin. And now I have an in where I can message that individual and say, hey, I work at UCCS. I'd like to connect with you. You can send a lot of messages. And when you don't have to pay for the LinkedIn Premium to send messages either. When you go to connect with a new contact, there's an option to send message. So every time you're connecting with someone, you should put a message in there that tells them how they know you, right? I mean, I meet a lot of people and I work with a lot of students. And so when I just get a random LinkedIn request, I don't want to have to go through and scroll through and see who you are and how I might know you. But the students or the community members who send me a message and say, hey, I was on the chamber webinar today. I heard you speak and I'd really like to connect with you about X, Y, and Z. That's perfect. And I know exactly what you need and what I can do to help you. So make sure that you're connecting with people, and you don't have to know them. That's the beauty of LinkedIn. You can search for them, find them, and we could do a whole workshop on how to use LinkedIn to search for jobs, to search for recruiters and make connections. But it is a very strong tool. So I'll put the link in there so you can grade your LinkedIn profile and see where you're at. And if you're actively looking for work, just make sure to be very active on LinkedIn. It'll help you quite a bit. And one last thing I'll say is make sure that you find the associations that coincide with your industry. So there's professional organizations, professional associations for every industry. Most of them have a LinkedIn page, and you can go there. You can, some of them have links to jobs. You can show an interest in that industry. And then when recruiters are looking, they go down to the section where it says interests, and they can see that you're connected with those associations. So that's really important as well.
And that's all outstanding information. And when I'm talking to clients, I generally I bring up the SSI score now. And initially I was looking at one and it had a score of like 70 on it, and and that individual's like, gee, it's only a 70, but that individual scored in like the top 2 percentile. So, it's not really somewhat graded like we think of it on term papers. but I always like to let them know, make sure that you always want to make sure you're in that top 5 percentile for all of your stuff. So relevant posts, having the relevant content is outstanding information to have on there, and just kind of show that you are somewhat of an expert in your field. I think that really goes a long way. And when I'm formatting these for clients too, I do like to take a standard resume that I put together and align that. And Al is back on. I'm going to get a little bit of her insight, and we still got a few minutes left on this, on how she recommends to her individuals coming into the Workforce Center on how to format the content on their LinkedIn profile.
Can you hear me okay, Kevin?
I hear you perfect.
Okay, super. Sorry, everyone, just a little bit of technical difficulties. I could not hear what was transpiring, so I had to go to the backup plan. This is why it's extremely important to test your equipment. To respond to your question, Kevin, what we talk about, we go through the basics of writing a headline, crafting a really great summary, and just a couple of things that we discuss. So I discuss particularly in my workshop has to do with making sure that you're incorporating some of the keywords that the industry that you're going into normally uses. You can use the position description as a start. Make sure you're writing an attractive headline where you are inviting people to your page. I know some folks will say, I'm looking for work. That may not be the best headline to write out there. You want to talk about what your skills are, what some of your experiences. And from a personal experience from myself, what I found is what I did when I started my LinkedIn page first was I actually copied and pasted my resume out there. And subsequently, I learned that that may not be the best thing to do. So again, you want to make sure that, and I think Sarah said this earlier, you want to make sure that the information that you have in your resume is consistent with what's on your LinkedIn page. Just try your best not to regurgitate every single thing from your resume onto your LinkedIn page. And again, the bottom line is this: what are you trying to do? What is the point that you're trying to get across to the employer? Because they are going to look you up. They're going to do a Google search, and if you have a LinkedIn page, hopefully that's where they will go and look you up and see what you have out there, what additional skills you may have, to help them be more successful in the organization.
Thanks, Al. Yeah, and I also too, I always put the LinkedIn URLs on my clients' resumes, and I always go in and edit and take those long characters out of there and try to customize that too. I think it shows that the individual is progressive, and a lot of my clients that are baby boomers, when they want to try to kind of modernize their information, I always tell them, make sure you have a solid LinkedIn profile, and make sure that URL address is on there, because that demonstrates your willingness to embrace new technology and utilize it. I think it's very critical. It's very vital. And when I'm doing resumes, I generally, I might take something that's standard and incorporate some of that information. But I always like to make sure that summary of qualifications is written in first person. Give more of that personalized stuff. I don't always go through the entire experiences in first person, but that summary, I think, really needs to, that's where it's like the cover letter format, where you yourself seem to be speaking to that audience. I think we got about a minute left before the next Q&A. Does anyone else have anything to share on personal branding?
Yeah, I was just going to share, I think several people, Megan and Al had both touched on this, that there is a toggle you can use that recruiters can know that you're open for a job. And then when we do job searches, you can pop up on keywords and things like that. And I think if you do your LinkedIn profile well, you can get contacts reaching out to you for jobs that aren't even posted yet. So sometimes you're getting ahead of the competition because they're reaching out to you before they've even posted their job, or maybe they just posted their job. So I know, that happens quite a bit, that we'll reach out to people and maybe we don't have a job posted yet, but we're just trying to keep them in mind for the next time we do. Or we do have a job and we want to say, hey, here's my rec number. I want you to go to apply to it so we can interview you. So that just puts you a step ahead of your competition.
I don't know if we talked about this while I was gone, but the other thing that, I can say is consider putting your picture out there. And make sure you are smiling in your picture, because you have that smile, You show them that you're inviting, and who says that they won't search your profile? So put a picture out there, make sure that your eyes are not covered, you're not wearing a hat, your glasses are not transitioning, or you're wearing shades. Put a picture out there and smile. And so that way, when they look through your skills and your experiences, they can say, okay, I can see this person, doing the job in our organization.
Were there any other questions out there?
And I had a question for Richard. I know in our pre-panel meetings, we were talking a little bit about social media and people in the military transitioning into a new job, and you had mentioned something about photos. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
Sure. So in your photo for LinkedIn, basically not having it be in military uniform. And like Kevin said, not having a hunting trip in the background of you with your greatest prize possession that we see out there. So making it personalized and not in military uniform, because that is no longer your expertise. You're moving into the civilian sector to continue.
Yep, leave that 7-pound largemouth bass off that photo. Emma, do we have anything else?
Yep, one more question. This one's directed at Sarah and anybody else on the panel after Sarah answers. When selecting open for job opportunities on LinkedIn, how do you identify the keywords to select in your profile for your targeted industry and job descriptions?
Right. So I would say more than likely, if that's an industry you've already been working in, you probably have the majority of keywords out there on your profile as well. So like if you're in the engineering, a recruiter is going to go in and they're going to search for the specific type of engineer they're looking for. So if that's something you've been doing, that's already going to be on your LinkedIn profile. Same thing if you're doing customer service, you've probably already worked at some kind of customer service role where that would be out there. But yeah, I would look at job descriptions for the types of jobs you want. And if there's a consistent word that all, if you look at 5 job descriptions, let's say, and all 5 job descriptions across all 5 companies say the same phrases or words, chances are that's something that everybody's gonna be looking for. So I would make sure that that's outlined in your profile somewhere as applicable. And that way when recruiters are going through searching, it does help your resume pop up for someone that we might want to look at and contact.
And I'd like to add to that really quick too. It's always good to do a refresher. LinkedIn encourages individuals to constantly make updates. And even if that means skill sets, a lot of these roles, they'll identify the top 10 that they're looking for. And a lot of times they might be the soft skills. And again, I'm not a big fan of soft skills, but if it says customer service and it's weighted, well, then you want to make sure in those 50 keywords, you have customer service. You want to make sure if it says project management, you have project management as one of your skills, verbal communications and so forth. So people might roll their eyes and say, why do I have to have that? But at the end of the day, if they're setting the parameters for those 10 skill sets, you want to at least make sure at a minimum that you've got, the majority of them on there. Ideally, you want all 10.